Secrets exposed. Prosecutors. Hit back in Bryan Kohberger case. In the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, a case once shrouded in horror is taking an unexpected legal turn. Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in a brutal nighttime attack, is now at the center of a high-stakes courtroom battle. But this time, it's not just about what happened that night. Prosecutors are demanding a new mental evaluation of Kohberger, challenging the defense's claims that he's neurodivergent, diagnosed with autism and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Behind closed doors, secret hearings and sealed motions have fueled speculation. Is this a tactic to avoid the death penalty, or a desperate attempt to explain the unthinkable? As the trial draws near, tensions are mounting, and the public is being left in the dark. But in this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on the latest developments in one of America's most unsettling cases. Dear friends, Bryan Kohberger's legal team has argued that his autism spectrum disorder and OCD should be considered mitigating factors, possibly shielding him from the death penalty if convicted. But prosecutors aren't backing down. They've requested their own mental health expert to evaluate Kohberger, raising questions about what the defense has already uncovered and whether the state believes those claims are credible. The judge has agreed, allowing the prosecution's expert to conduct a psychological assessment under strict conditions. No interruptions, no personality disorder testing, and the exam must be observed remotely. This move has sparked heated debate. Can a condition like autism really explain the behavior tied to such a violent crime? And if so, should it affect the ultimate punishment? The stakes are enormous, as both sides prepare for a penalty phase that could determine life or death. The courtroom is becoming just as unpredictable as the crime scene itself once was. The prosecution's push for their own mental health evaluation of Bryan Kohberger comes after the defense introduced reports suggesting he suffers from autism, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and developmental coordination disorder. These diagnoses are now at the center of a legal tug-of-war. Kohberger's attorneys argue these neurological and psychological conditions limit his emotional responses and should not be interpreted as coldness or guilt. But the state is pushing back, hard. Prosecutors insist that while they don't plan to use Kohberger's mental health as an aggravating factor, they must be allowed to counter the defense's claims during the penalty phase should he be convicted. Idaho law prohibits using mental conditions as a defense to a crime, but not as evidence to argue for leniency. That distinction is fueling courtroom drama as the judge tries to balance fairness with legal precedent. Meanwhile, both sides are wrangling over the details. Should the defense be present during the prosecution's evaluation? Can the expert test Kohberger for personality disorders? How will any findings be used in court without violating Kohberger's Fifth Amendment rights? The judge ruled the exam can proceed, but only under strict limits. And there's still a broader issue at play: public perception. In such a high-profile case, each legal move is magnified. Could the way Kohberger reacts in court, his posture, his silence, be misunderstood by jurors unfamiliar with autism? That concern now haunts both legal teams as they prepare for what could become one of the most emotionally and ethically complex trials of the decade. As the legal battle over mental health evaluations unfolds, the court has taken extraordinary steps to manage the flow of information. Earlier this month, Judge John Judge held a sealed hearing, completely closed to the public and the press, concerning the prosecution's motion to examine Bryan Kohberger. In a system that values transparency, such secrecy is rare and raises eyebrows. What was so sensitive that even the hearing minutes were locked away? Speculation is rampant, especially since Judge Judge had previously cautioned both legal teams to avoid overusing sealed filings. Now, that guidance seems to have shifted. The court ultimately ruled that the state's mental health expert may evaluate Kohberger within a limited window of 7 to 10 days, but under tightly controlled conditions. Defense counsel may observe the evaluation via a one-way video feed, but cannot be seen, heard, or interrupt in any way. This compromise reflects just how delicate the situation is. The original expert the prosecution had selected reportedly backed out over disagreements regarding attorney presence and testing parameters. With such tension surrounding even procedural logistics, it's clear that both sides are maneuvering carefully, each legal step laced with strategy, precedent, and the knowledge that this trial is under a national microscope. The defense has argued that Bryan Kohberger's neurological conditions, including autism spectrum disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder, should be considered significant mitigating factors if he's convicted and faces the death penalty. His attorneys contend these conditions impact his social behavior, communication, and emotional response, making certain interactions appear abnormal to others. They insist that if the jury is unaware of his diagnosis during the guilt phase, they may misinterpret his flat demeanor as lack of remorse or guilt, only to feel misled when that diagnosis is revealed later in mitigation. The prosecution, on the other hand, claims they won't use his autism against him, but reserve the right to challenge how much weight the jury should give it if it's raised as a reason to spare his life. The courtroom is thus becoming a battleground, not just of evidence, but of interpretation, psychology, and the legal line between understanding and accountability. In a major turn, Judge Hyper has ruled that prosecutors will be allowed to conduct their own mental health evaluation of Bryan Kohberger. This decision came after weeks of legal back and forth, objections from the defense, and a sealed hearing that raised eyebrows across the legal community. The judge outlined specific ground rules. The evaluation must take place within 7 to 10 days, and attorneys from both sides can observe via a one-way video feed, but cannot interfere in any way. This move by the court came after the original expert retained by the prosecution withdrew due to disagreements over testing and attorney presence. The new expert will not be allowed to evaluate Kohberger for personality disorders, as the defense's experts did not raise those issues, meaning there's legally nothing to rebut. Judge Hyper emphasized that allowing such an evaluation could violate Kohberger's Fifth Amendment rights and risk opening what he called a big can of worms. Meanwhile, the debate continues about whether Kohberger's conditions are mental illnesses or neurological disabilities. That distinction could have major consequences for the trial's penalty phase. Prosecutors are preparing to push back if autism is introduced as a mitigating factor, insisting that it doesn't outweigh the gravity of the crimes if Kohberger is found guilty. Ultimately, this battle of psychiatric experts may shape the final outcome, not only in whether Kohberger is convicted, but in what penalty he may face if he is. And in a death penalty case, every expert opinion could carry life or death weight. Despite the intensity of the prosecution's efforts, the judge made a key decision that directly affects the emotional dynamics of the courtroom. Prosecutors had requested that Kohberger's family be barred from attending the trial until after they testified. But Judge Hyper rejected this request, stating there was no legal basis to exclude them. He emphasized that their testimonies are narrow in scope and that prior interviews had already been conducted. These recordings would prevent the family from tailoring their statements based on what others said in court. The judge also noted that, given the extensive media coverage, it would be unrealistic to assume Kohberger's family hadn't already been exposed to much of the evidence. Allowing them to stay in court aligns with fair trial standards and could influence how the jury perceives Kohberger as a person with family support. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, a bombshell report from Dateline NBC added more intrigue to the case. According to the outlet, Kohberger had searched for notorious serial killer Ted Bundy online and had photos of women from Washington State and Idaho universities, some allegedly connected to the victims, on his phone. though no digital link to the victims has been officially established. This revelation adds chilling weight to an already high-profile case. As this case unfolds, the battle between expert testimony, legal strategy, and public perception grows fiercer. What happens next could shape the outcome of a trial watched by the entire nation. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more updates on this gripping story.